Hello, everybody. I'm Roy Firestone, and this is an ESPN Classic presentation. Tom Landry coached the Dallas Cowboys for 29 years. He led Dallas to its first 2 world titles, 5 Super Bowl appearances in all. But he'll also be remembered most for his straight-laced image. Tonight, you'll see a side of him rarely seen before as we look back at Landry in his own words over the years.
The greatest experience I ever had, Roy, was coaching the New York Giants defense. I was left corner. They gave me the job to handle the whole defense at that time. You know, and so I was very close. Some of my best friends are Rosie Greer and Sam Huff and Andy Robustelli and all the great guys I coached. But when you become a head coach, you've got to distance yourself because the player's whole future is in your hands, and you can't get too close to players. They can't have an out at all. I mean, they have to perform, and you have to do that. I know Roger, who's, you know, one of my great friends now, when he was retiring, he came into my office, and he walked in my office to tell me about it. He says, you know, Coach, it's the first time I've ever been in your office. And that's probably true in there because we had a lot of relationship outside of my office. But I felt that way, and I feel like, and I say in my book, you know, that the coaching is really to get players to do what they don't want to do to achieve what they want to achieve.
Sure.
I mean, that's the whole motivation. And so I wasn't close from that standpoint.
I always felt like it was very important that you had a little bit of a division between your team and yourself. Because I think once you get too close to them, then you give them really an out. You know, they don't have to pay the same kind of price, you know. But when they when they looked at me, you know, they knew, you know, that I was going to be pretty harsh on them.
I had many times, you know, in which I had personal relationships with players. But it's very hard for a player to come into my office and say, hey, I got this problem, I got this weakness, because, you know, his future's in my hands. But I did handle them when they had the drug problems and they had all the other problems.
You take a look at the list, particularly in the late 70s, of the troubled athletes on the Cowboys. You start with Bob Hayes, 78, pleaded guilty to 3 counts of delivery of illegal drugs. Harvey Martin, addicted to cocaine. Raphael Septien, arrested molesting a 10-year-old girl. That was the charge. Larry Bethea, charged with forgery. Dwayne Thomas had his problem.
You know, America changed so tremendously in the 60s, you know, with the freedom issues and all that came out of it and the drug scenes and all that came out of the 60s. And not knowing much about drugs, Dwayne was the first, you know, and he came in fine the first year, went to the Super Bowl against Baltimore. The next year he came back and he was just a belligerent type of person. He wouldn't talk to anybody, wouldn't do anything. And I don't know how we made the year. The only reason I think I kept I really had 2 standards at that time, one for Dwayne, one for the rest. But
You regret that?
No, I don't, in that sense, because we were 5 years, if you remember. We lost 2 close ones to the Green Bay, and we lost 2 in the playoffs against Cleveland very badly. We were the team that couldn't win the big one. Yeah. A very mature football team, you know. And at the time we made our first Super Bowl, we had a very mature football team, and they could handle that if you have a lot of maturity. Because the thing about Dwayne Thomas, Roy, was so amazing was that he would go into a meeting, he'd pull a sock over his eyes, and he'd just sit there like this the whole time. Would never take a note, never say a word. And you go out on the football field, you never miss an assignment.
You talked to him and he would never respond.
Oh, I'd call him in the office to talk to him in there, and he would be like you and I, and he would look straight at me with not blinking his eyes for maybe 15, 20 minutes. He wouldn't say a word. That's kind of eerie.
Speaking of the players who felt in their heart that maybe Tom should have been there for them, Thomas Hollywood Henderson, obviously, well chronicled his troubles. We'll listen to a clip now of Tom Henderson and his view of Coach Landry, and I want you to respond to it.
Well, you know, Tom Landry is a hands-off type coach. I always resented the fact that he was a guy could break his leg in front of him, and he would look at the clock, look at the sheet, and he'd move 10 yards away.
But you felt deep down he really felt for the play.
I really do, because he was a player himself. I just resented everything about Tom Landry, because I probably wanted what he had. He was such a father figure to me, the father figure I never had. And I resented him, and even more after he fired me, because in his 30 years of coaching, he never fired a guy in the 12th game of a season, a guy who was a starter. And then he said he didn't know I was a cocaine addict or didn't know I was involved in drugs. I mean, it's something he'd never done. He went through Dwayne Thomas and all his years.
We weren't prepared for the Dwayne Thomases or Thomas Henderson. They were before we understood drugs, you know, as players. And I regret that. You know, I would have loved to have been able to do something for him to help him in there. And he's out now, and I just got a letter from him recently. He's down in Austin now, wanting to play golf, you know. And Dwayne Thomas, who I was speaking in Albuquerque the other night, he and his wife came over from Taos just to visit with me. You know, I mean, there's great relationships we have, but during those times, it was very difficult to know what to do. Nobody knew how to handle those situations.
When the Cowboy was a Giant. When we return, the early years with the Giants and Tom Landry. Welcome back to this special edition of Up Close Classic. I'm Roy Firestone. He coached some of the greatest Cowboy teams of all time. He posted 20 consecutive winning seasons. But in the beginning, Tom Landry learned the game of football from men like Paul Brown and Vince Lombardi. And one pointer he learned later became his trademark.
Well, you know, when I became an assistant coach with the New York Giants in there, I had a feeling that you ought to look like you're successful. You know, and that's where it came about. I said, man, you know, Paul Brown was one of the ones that influenced me a whole lot in my coaching because he always looked like he was successful. And I thought to myself, well, that's the way to go.
But he was more than a look. He had been a great player, an all-pro defensive back with the Giants, the team he would later coach during an historic time for professional football.
When we started in New York, it was the infancy of professional football. You know, it's been going on for 20 years, but nobody knew about it. We grew up in New York with those New York Giant teams with television. And television is the thing that burst pro football across the United States, and we saw that happen. We saw it happen in New York in the late 50s, and then when the other leagues came out of that and we saw the merger, then things started to grow, and they've been growing ever since.
Do you look back at the Giant years in some ways as some of your most pleasant years?
Well, they probably are from a coaching standpoint. See, when I started coaching in 1954, they gave me the coaching job. I played left corner, and I coached the whole defense. We didn't have any more coaches on defense.
They have 11 now.
Yeah, they got 11 now, so I coached the whole group, and I coached that group through all of the 50s, and we were very close in those days. And that's fun. When you can coach as an assistant coach, you don't have the pressure of the head coach. It's pretty exciting. It was so simple in those days. We didn't have the special categories we have today and the substitutions like we had today. And we had 2 pass defenses and 2 run defenses, and that's all. And that's all we played the whole time. But now you must have 25 or 30 pass defenses.
What does it mean to be coach of the Dallas Cowboys, Tom?
Well, it's meant a lot to me personally because I never expected to coach. When I went into coaching here, I didn't intend to stay because I was an expansion club, and I figured we'd be about 3 or 4 years, and we'd be out of business. We had a great owner, and Clint Murkison gave me a 10-year contract. And that's what caused us to be stable and then caused me to stay in football.
Do you think you're appreciated?
I don't know. I never really thought much about it, really. You know, I coach football for the excitement of doing just what I'm doing right now, looking at players, new players, bringing them up. Can I bring them back to contention by September and get them in a race and make a run for it? That's all that motivates me. Super Bowls don't motivate me. You know, winning being a winningest coach in history doesn't motivate me. But that's what motivates me. That's what keeps me in coaching.
We felt like that we were pretty good, you know, in handling the league itself and our relationship with it. And we always were, and the people always seemed to recognize the Cowboys. Every place we went, we had people rooting for the Cowboys. And that's what really brought on America's team.
What do you think it'll be like, I guess is what I'm asking, to finally give it up and to disassociate yourself with something
that's hard to really say what it's going to be like. I don't know because it's been my life for so long. You know, and I've been doing the same thing over and over so many years. I'm sure I'll miss it in there, but I think I'll find other things to do.
But little did Landry know his retirement would come sooner than later. Up next, his painful dismissal in Dallas. I'm Roy Firestone. He was the only coach the Cowboys ever had. But in 1988, the new Dallas management wanted to make a move, and Tom Landry was the odd man out.
You say you're on a golf course and Jerry Jones came up to you and Tex first tried to soften the blow and it was over. It was very painful. You said you were very angry and disappointed. Did the Cowboys management, up and from top to bottom, handle that appropriately? Could it have been done any differently?
Well, sure, it could have been done differently. I mean, it could have been handled differently. For example, Tex and myself, we knew nothing we knew the negotiation. It'd been, because the Cowboys were up for sale for a year, or so from Bright's thing. We had a lot of people who were interested and came in and talked. And Jerry Jones was just one new owner that might be a possibility. But they did the negotiation. When they came to the point where they were going to really get serious about the thing, I think Tex, who is the manager, the president of the Cowboys, should have been involved some way, at least if you just tell him. Mm-hmm. And when we heard it off the TV on Thursday night that Jerry Jones was going to buy the clubs and that Jimmy Johnson was going to be the head coach. And then before the weekend or before they signed, to own it, then Jimmy Johnson's in town, taking pictures. So those things, you handle those things different.
He was a great coach, the only coach the Cowboys have had for 29 years. Now, my posture was this. We'd been involved in weeks and weeks of negotiating. Several people had looked at the Cowboys. The Cowboys needed some things to happen for them to be viable in the future. It was pretty obvious that some changes needed to be made.
You think you'll ever bury the hatchet completely?
Well, people keep talking about that, but, I don't feel any animosity. I don't feel any thing against the management. I think probably the Lord took that away from me. Of course, being a Christian, I handled the thing a lot different maybe than some would. Mm-hmm. But I've never had any feelings, regarding that, as far as anger or anything. I mean, sure, it could have been done right. I was very upset the way they handled Tex Schramm in the meeting, at the time they announced it. I mean, here he is standing back in the corner.
Couldn't find a seat.
He couldn't find a seat. Well, to me, that hurt me more than anything to see that happen.
I really didn't know Tom, that well. I went to the Cowboys camp a few times, training camp, and he was always, very cordial and pleasant to me. And then even after, I got the job at Dallas, I went to Tom and talked to him on a couple of different occasions and, asked for his advice and what he thought about certain players, etc. And again, he was very professional and very good to me. And there really was, there was never any outwardly negative feelings. Deep down, I'm sure there had to be some, some resentment. But he was always good to me. And I tried to tell people this when I first went to Dallas. They didn't understand the respect I had for him and the job that he had done, with the Dallas Cowboys. He was a great, great football coach. And so for me wanting to be negative towards somebody that I had that much respect for was asinine.
Publicly, Landry may have forgiven Jones and the Cowboys, but privately it was a different story. After his firing, Landry rarely returned to Texas Stadium to see his old team play.
I just don't feel comfortable, out there. And if I go out there, it's hard to go into that stadium and really enjoy a game. And so I really didn't want to go anymore. And so I want them to be successful, even though they don't handle the things the way I would have handled them. But still, they're the Dallas Cowboys.
When we return on this special tribute to Tom Landry, he'll talk about the greatest games and the greatest players he ever coached. Welcome back to Up Close Classic. I'm Roy Firestone. Tom Landry coached in hundreds of memorable games, first as an assistant with the New York Giants, and then with the Dallas Cowboys. But there are a few that Landry held in awe.
I think I was most proud of winning, a Super Bowl. I think that's in everybody's mind. I don't care who you are. Jim Brown never got to one. O.J. never did. A lot of players never made the Super Bowl, and I think that's the first thing that was really important. It really started in 1966 because we played Green Bay, lost around the goal line when we jumped off sides in and we, of course, next year we went to the Ice Bowl game, which was the coldest thing you ever saw. It was really supposed to be around 20, when we came out on Saturday because Vance had put heaters under the field. And boy, we were great. We thought great. So we went into to bed that night, and when we woke up, the operator said it's 20 below zero.
Invariably, people ask you about the great teams. There's so many great teams, so many great players. Just quick thoughts on the following. Dandy Don Meredith.
Well, he was an unusual person. He and I didn't see eye to eye in a lot of things because Danny, he was carefree. He liked to play the game with a lot of fun and everything. And, you know, the quarterback is a discipline thing in our business. And so, but I liked Danny. I mean, I always liked him. But we just disagreed a little bit on the football field.
You said behind his veneer, behind his mask of humor, there was a man who had deep insecurities and fears.
You know, down deep, he wanted to be successful. You know, he had that turmoil inside of him. And he had a lot of difficulty, family-wise and all, that hurt him a lot. But you got to remember that he came in when we had no pass protection. He probably took a greater beating than any quarterback I've ever seen. And he was the most courageous player. He would play hurt like no quarterback I ever had.
Roger?
Well, Roger is one in a lifetime. You know, he's a guy who had great qualities of character, great competitor, you know. When you think of 20-some games that he brought us back in a 2-minute period to win in his career, I mean, it's unheard of. I mean, that's one reason we had 20 years of winning, because of players like Roger Staubach.
The guy was just amazing. You know, I didn't think anybody could spend 4 years in the service, you know, and end up making an NFL. And, of course, Roger came on, so I was kind of ignoring him, and we were getting beat by Green Bay in the playoffs. And Craig Martin was our quarterback, and I said, well, let's put him in, give him some experience. And that was a remarkable thing. I think he scored he scored 2 touchdowns right in the last minute, and gosh, it was a great game.
What do you think about when you think of Bob Hayes?
Speed, exceptional, sadness for him, because he was a great guy when he came to us. He was a little immature, and as he left us, you know, he fell into trouble. But he turned us around in 66 and 67, because he was the most exciting thing in football at that time.
Was there a best team, a best time?
Well, of course, I think the best time was our Super Bowl that we won against Miami, because we went through all those years. You can't win the big one. We played a great Green Bay Packer team to the wire twice with a young upstart team, and everybody thought we should have won it against a team as great as the Packers were. And then we said that we couldn't win the big one, and we lost the playoffs. And that team really struggled, you know, really struggled to get to the Super Bowl against Baltimore and lose in the last minute with a field goal. Still couldn't win the big one, and then we won the big one.
Coming up next, Tom Landry's brush with death as a pilot in World War II.
Okay, sweetie. Bye-bye.
Welcome back. When he was in his late teens, Tom Landry enlisted in the military. It was wartime, and he served as a bomber pilot in Eastern Europe. What's often overlooked in such a glorious football career was that Tom Landry was a real-life war hero.
You know, I came out of South Texas. You know, I was 17 years old. At 18, going to university, joined the service. I was overseas, and I didn't know, I had never been away from my hometown. But we were so young that we really didn't appreciate what kind of situation we were in at those days. But we were making a run. At this time, we were flying way into Czechoslovakia at that time. And the B-17's got about a 10.5 hour range, and we were coming back across, and it was after D-Day, and we had Alden Airport, you know, in France at that time. But we thought we leaned our mixtures out so thin to try to get back across the channel again in the flight that we were flying 3 or 4 hours, and all 4 engines cut off. So right when we were over Holland at the time, or Denmark, London, so we said, well, we're out of gas, you know. And see, we made the quick checks, you know, being excited about being out of gas. And we just missed the mixture control check. And the pilot said, and we were going down all the time. It was over Holland. I remember all the water down there. And when I started to get out of my seat, I looked up and I saw the mixture controls in lean. And for some unknown reason, I pushed them forward as I started to get out of my seat to bail out. And all 4 engines came on. And you don't think that wasn't a relief? And we went, I remember, because we were very low at the time, they caught on, and we went right over Amsterdam, you know, and boy, the AK gun was following us, and we were weaving, trying to miss the AK, and we got back. You know, it's just funny things that bring you out of something like that.
What does it do to a human being to brush that close with disaster?
Oh, I don't know. I guess it makes you realize the importance of life, you know, more important than you think, things that you think are important. It brings you close to death. And I think any time you come close to death, you realize there is a God up there, and it's something more than just what you see down here.
Did you lose a brother?
Yes, I lost my brother. He flew B-17s too. He went over. He was older, 4 years older than I was, and he went over the first wave, and he was flying the northern route through Iceland and there on the B-17 and never got over to England. So we never knew what happened to it. It went down someplace.
You see the stoic figure on the sideline with the hat without much emotion, but there is the inner Tom Landry, the very emotional side.
Well, it's just the old thing that I've said so many years ago. I felt like if you were going to be successful as an athlete in there, you had to have a great ability to concentrate. You know, black out everything. The bad play you made, the scoreboard when you're behind and all. And I trained myself to do that. And therefore, when I'm in a game, I'm completely blanked out to everything that's happening negatively in a game. And that's why I never smile. You know, I'm always looking at plays ahead, and Dorsett makes a great run, or somebody makes a great catch, and the fans go wild, and they look down at me, and I didn't even see the play. You know, I wasn't even looking at the play when it happened. But I'm emotional. If I'm not part of the thing, and I'm watching a contest that means something to me, I hurt just like everybody else does, and I can shout and holler just like anybody else can.
Well, that wraps up this special edition of Up Close Classic featuring the life and career of the legendary Dallas coach, Tom Landry. I'm Roy Firestone. Thanks for watching. Good night.